Hello and welcome to Techiechap. So I've been away for a couple of weeks and I've come back and there is tons of Linux news and BSD news and updates. So I'm going to try and catch up with that over the next few weeks. However, perhaps the biggest Linux news over the last few weeks is the release of Linux Mint 21. So I'm going to give that a test drive today. Let's find out how I get on after the intro. So this is it, the Linux Mint 21 desktop that you get by default after running through the installer. Installer, as usual with these Linux Mint distributions, was very easy, very quick. Probably around 10 to 11 clicks just to get the software installed, so very quick and rapid. And yeah, it took about 10 minutes to install on this Dell laptop. It's a i5 laptop. So first impressions is it looks very polished. It looks quite nice. But perhaps I should preface this that I've actually had experience with Linux Mint before, so perhaps this video should be entitled "Can I Forgive Linux Mint?" Because I was running Linux Mint back in 2015-2016 and it was actually my first Linux installation that I ran and I loved it. I had such a happy time with Linux Mint. However, in 2016, I downloaded a new ISO for Linux Mint, and that ISO had been hacked, and all my details, all my passwords and usernames, were then taken from that install of Linux Mint because it was actually a hacked ISO. Back then, the Linux Mint team were a lot smaller and the Linux Mint website was hosted on a WordPress site and unfortunately it got hacked. And ever since then, I have absolutely avoided Linux Mint like the plague. So I think this is more about me forgiving the Linux Mint team for that. Obviously, it wasn't their fault, but unfortunately, because of that, I had to go through quite a lot to reset all my usernames, all my passwords in all the places I used them back in 2016. And back then, it was a very painful process. So, can I forgive Linux Mint? On first impressions, yeah, I think hopefully I can. I think the website is a lot better nowadays. It's hosted in a lot more secure fashion. And I'm very hopeful that the way the usernames and passwords are stored as well, you do have an option to encrypt the drive as well when you install Linux Mint 21. So there is an extra level of protection there. And they do seem to have stepped up their security since 2016. It's obviously a long time ago. So really, this is my first look at Linux Mint since then. And it looks pretty different, I have to say. This is the Cinnamon edition. It's got a brand new file manager, a look to the file manager, which I believe is called Mutter. The file manager itself is Nemo 5.4.2. And everything looks pretty polished, I have to say. These are the default applications you get, and the icon theme is really nice. Everything looks super slick and polished. And if I go to an app, I can actually right click on the application within the panel and I can either add to the panel, uninstall it right there from within the menu, which is also very nice as well. Just talking through things down here, we've got a pretty decent calendar and time application in the bottom right hand corner. We've got a battery indicator. We've got the sound volume mixer. Now I do like sound volume mixers when they have a link to the sound settings as well, as opposed to just a mini volume, because I think more often than not, particularly when I'm recording, I need to get to the sound settings quite quickly. And here we are, we're straight into the sound control panel. So that's pretty useful. If we click on networks, wireless has worked out of the box and looks very slick and very nice. And then we have here the update manager. And this is a customized update manager that the Linux Mint team have written. And if I just click OK, it'll now go off and find any updates for the Linux Mint install. And actually, there's a nice option here to switch to a local mirror. Let me just pop in my password. I've just set up a temporary password on here. Okay, the base is Ubuntu, and I think that'll do for now, rather than you watching me fiddling around with the repositories. Okay, so there's a new version of the update manager, so that's interesting, and it links into Synaptic Package Manager, which is also interesting that links into Synaptic, which is kind of the standard package manager for Linux, and a very good one at that as well. Right, so it's going to go off, and there's a ton of updates to run, as you can see here, and I won't run them now because I'm recording, but it's good that this option as well about switching to a local mirror is coming up, because obviously that will be faster for me, being that I am in the UK in the middle of a heat wave and this Dell is getting very hot. Right, so let's close that. Let's carry on. It's good that there's a little icon down there as well in the update manager to let me know that there are updates available. Bluetooth has been enabled as well, so that's good. It's been picked up by the Linux Mint install, and because to record this video I have installed OBS Studio, the normal OBS Studio icon that you would expect in these installations has come up in the system tray down there below. Over here on the left we have the file manager, which I've already taken a look at, and this is based on Nemo 5.4.2. Don't have any issues with Nemo as a file manager. I think it's second only to Dolphin file manager in terms of use, and I think it's a really pretty decent one. What's very nice about this is that the thumbnails have come up straight away, which is brilliant. You can see the takes of my videos there, and that's really quite cool that that's worked out of the box. During the installation there is an option to install Multimedia Codecs. It's just a little tick box, so that's pretty easy to see, and it's nice that that is part of the installation as well. So over here we have the terminal, and it's a pretty decent terminal. If we click on About, it's the GNOME or GNOME terminal, which I've now been told is the way I should pronounce this. It's GNOME terminal, and it's version 3.440 for GNOME 42, and that's great. Nice. I like green on black as a default as well, because I think I'm in the Matrix. Firefox is the default browser. There it is, and I like the fact that the theming that they have chosen does tie nicely together. Everything does seem to be nicely tied together, and things like resize works really nice as well. The graphics effects are very smooth on here. If we go over here to the far left, we have the Linux Mint icon, and we have the main menu bar, as you would expect, almost like in a Windows type installation. So this Linux Mint install will likely appeal to those who are moving across from Windows. I don't want to say it, but as I was back in 2016, and this type of setup did appeal to me as a Windows user moving across to Linux. Okay, so we have a kind of shortcut bar up here, and again we have Firefox, and then we have the App Store. So let's take a look at the App Store, or Software Manager as they call it. When you first install it, it has to go off and update the caches, and that takes a little while, and download the software repositories, but it takes about 2 or 3 minutes, or it did on this laptop as it is. So it looks fairly nice. It's Mint install, so it is a customized installation manager. I actually installed OBS through this, and it worked absolutely fine. There's a good list of applications here that are sort of highlighted, and they're all very useful too. Now, because when I do these reviews, I like to test the actual distribution, I record it using OBS, which obviously does reflect on the system resources that we'll look at shortly, but I will be also building the actual video on here as well, and will let you know if I come across any issues in the notes afterwards, or I'll edit the video to say there were issues. So far I haven't hit any, it has to be said, or any biggies, it has to be said, whilst reviewing particularly Linux distributions. I haven't had any real big issues. So here we can see I normally do my videos, I put them together using a tool called Kdenlive. In my personal opinion, I think Kdenlive is probably one of the best tools for video editing, and I know sometimes there are updates and it does sort of throw things a little bit, and I've certainly experienced that in the past as well, but my personal experience, I've always been able to work around those, and Kdenlive has always been my go-to unless it's not available for whatever reason in the repositories that I'm looking at on the distribution that I'm reviewing. So go ahead and click on install. I pop in my password and off it goes to install. Now the repositories and the mirrors are likely to be in the US, I believe, so because I haven't switched to local repositories, this could take a little while to actually go off to the US, because I'm based in the UK, and pull down Kdenlive, so that could cause a little bit of a delay whilst it's installing that. You get a nice little progress bar here that lets you know what's going on, so that's quite cool, and you even get little dots animating here to tell you that something's going on. There are software managers that I've looked at before, and you click on something to install. I think the Discover Center sometimes does this on KDE. You click on something to install, and then you've got no indication that it is actually installing anything. It just says click install, and then nothing kind of happens. Some installations they have that, so it's nice to see a progress bar to actually know that something is happening and that the software is actually installing. That's all cool. We'll let that install in the background. Right, so what applications do you get with Linux Mint? Quite a few, it has to be said. So if we just look through the categories here, we've got accessories. So you have your archive manager, you have your calculator, character map, disks for managing disks utilities, document viewer for managing things like PDFs, file renamer tool like a batch file renamer. Let's just take a quick look at that, and that's very nice. You can actually batch file name, batch rename files through this tool, so that's a very nice little tool there. Then we have accessories, file renamer, the file manager, which is Nemo, as we've looked at before, font manager. Let's have a look at the font manager. Yeah, a very simple, easy to use font. So if you want a new font, you can simply download it and then drag it in here, and that will be available for you to use. And if we've got image viewer, let's take a look to see what the image viewer is like. It's something called X Viewer 3.2.9, and I have read some pretty positive reviews of X Viewer. So I don't have any photographs on here really to scroll through and show you, but when you scroll through the photographs, it will create like a slideshow for you automatically as well, which is pretty cool, I have to say. Notes, and I know that Linux Mint users do like these sticky notes. I'm not a big fan of them myself, but it is a nice, clever way of being able to make a quick note of things and just have them on a desktop. I think given that I'm a laptop user here on a laptop screen, I find it clutters the screen a little bit too much. But if I was running this on a bigger screen, then perhaps sticky notes to one side with useful things that I need to remember, like buy the milk or whatever, that could be quite useful. Another feature that's being built into this notes application is that you can duplicate notes as well. So that's a quite nice, neat little feature. So I'm going to get rid of that because, as I say, I'm not a keen fan of notes. There's something here called Onboard, so we'll just take a look at that, and that is a Onboard Keyboard. So that's quite nice. If you do, it's got me actually out of a few situations where the keyboard stopped working for whatever reason, and I needed to type something on screen, and the Onboard Keyboard has helped me out of that situation. But also, if you have a touch screen, you can use the Onboard Keyboard as well. Then we got passwords and keys, and that's quite a nice utility for managing your password and keys. It's an application called Seahorse. It's well known, and it's just a way of being able to remember all your password and keys locally on the system, and of course that is encrypted as well. And like I say, during the installation you can encrypt your entire volume as well, so that's quite nice. It doesn't sync with anything in the cloud. For that I would recommend something like Bitwarden, because that has a cloud synchronization as well, and it's free to use. So yeah, that's a pretty decent tool, Bitwarden. Then we have Redshift, so we'll just click on Redshift and have a look at that. As you can see in the background, actually Kdenlive has actually installed, and one of the things I should have mentioned as well is that it automatically uses FlatHub, and FlatHub works out of the box within the software manager, so that also is a nice little feature. You can see some of these applications that I've opened and closed. They've actually come down here in the little notification bar, and this is Redshift down here, where you can choose to suspend your screen. You can choose the color temperature for the screen as well. And that's all really quite nice. List under administration, we get things like the software sources, the Synaptic Package Manager. Let's take a look at the system monitor and see what we have running here. And we're just going to take a look at the top one, and of course that is OBS because I'm installing this on OBS. Interestingly, Cinnamon desktop itself, nice, it's got some icons here rather than just the names, so that's quite neat. Cinnamon is using 1.43% CPU, 81.1 megabytes of memory, so it's fairly low on memory resources. And then if we just take a look at the resource graph as it's up here. All right, so I'm running an i5 with 4 CPU threads, so and they are running around about 30, just under 40%. And if I wasn't running OBS, then they would be probably running a lot less than that, probably hovering around the 20%. Memory is pretty good. Memory usage, 2 gig of memory is being used at the moment, 24.3% of the 8.2 gig of RAM. Again, you know, because I'm running OBS here, and I'm running obviously system resource manager as well, that's nice to see that it's a very steady memory usage. And you also get to see the network usage as well. So actually Cinnamon here is looking like it's running pretty well. Let's just move things around, see if it spikes a little. The classic move windows around to see if the CPU spikes, and you can see it's fairly well behaved there. So yeah, looks very stable there. Looks very nice. Screensaver, sound, startup application, system info. Just check that as well, which kind of gives you a nice summary of your system information, and you do have the option to upload that to the Linux Mint team so that they can then verify that actually Linux Mint will work on your hardware that you are running. It's really useful for the team to know that their software is running on different types of hardware to say the ones they've tested it on. Great. Oh, well, we need to take a look at the desktop backgrounds. So let's see what Linux Mint includes as backgrounds. And at first glance, it looks like not a lot, just a lot of dark backgrounds here. But if I click on Vanessa, and here we have a whole bunch of backgrounds which look very nice. And of course, the default pictures folder as well. So yeah, let's take a look at some of them, see what they're like. Of course, you know, desktop backgrounds, you can download your own ones if you want to. It's just nice having something there by default, and these certainly are pretty nice backgrounds. Digital stream there. So what do I think of Linux Mint 21? Well, actually, I'm pretty impressed, it has to be said. And I was impressed during the installation, and as soon as I started up, I've been quite impressed with the tools that they've included by default, the work that's gone into here as well. It's a nice, solid looking distribution. It's been described as the distribution that just works, and I have to say, it seems to have just worked for me as well. This version of Linux Mint 21 really is quite pleasing. I'm obviously coming from a place of the last Linux Mint I looked at was way back in 2016. This version, it looks like a modern Linux distribution. It's leaps and miles ahead of that version. I have seen some comments that Linux Mint 21 isn't perhaps as big a leap as people were hoping it was going to be. I think what the Linux Mint team have done with this version of Linux Mint is essentially refine it and make it even more stable, and added some options in some of the applications that they now manage as well that are included in Linux Mint to make things work. In terms of rating, I've got to say it's a 4.5 out of 5. Why am I not giving it 5? There are other distributions that obviously look similar, but I do think that Linux Mint 21, they've got a real handle on creating a very slick distribution and providing something that is solid and stable. Perhaps that 0.5 that I'm missing from giving it a 5 out of 5 is about innovation. I don't think there's anything particularly innovative about this release. I don't think there's anything that makes me go, wow, that's amazing. Why haven't people done that before? But this is a solid release. So there we go. If you have enjoyed my review of Linux Mint 21 Vanessa Edition Cinnamon, I should also mention there is a Mate and an XFCE version of Linux Mint. Then yeah, please click on a like and subscribe. If you have any comments as well, perhaps you're a Linux Mint user, perhaps you were affected by that Linux Mint 2016, so perhaps there's a little bit of distrust of Linux Mint lingering from that, just as it was with me, then it'd be great to see your comments down below. But that's been my review of Linux Mint 21 Vanessa Edition, 4.5 out of 5. Fantastic release. I look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks for watching Techiechap. Bye bye.